I've wanted to show this to people for a little while. There's a craze going on over here, 24th Street at the Crumble Cookie restaurant, bakery, whatever it is. But this place every day has an insanely massive line of people wanting to get cookies. And then we've got that other Chip City. Nothing to do with the CHIPS Act, but the Chip City is back there. Nobody ever goes there. So I don't know. I haven't even tried a cookie from this place. They're going crazy with the cookies. Oh, look at that. We got bad. There we go. Signal's back. Yeah, I'm going live today, so please don't attack me on the street. And wanted to talk about a video I think a lot of people saw yesterday. The video that John Cullen and I did with Dr. Robert Malone. Frankly, I was surprised that he agreed to do that. The funny thing is, I want to talk a little bit about how the whole thing came about, because something unexpected occurred. And it's caused me to realize that there's a lot more going on here than I initially realized. Now, a lot of people who've been watching Crowdsource the Truth for a long time are going to know that John Cullen and I have kind of had beef with Dr. Malone. Basically, that's certainly the most I've ever spoken to him, yesterday on the interview. And thank you. I think it was really nice of him to come on. But the most I had ever spoken to Dr. Malone before, I had contacted him when he was sued by George Webb. Because like I said, I didn't know Dr. Malone. I didn't get all that into his research or anything like that during the COVID times. I mean, my COVID research was walking around here and talking to John. I mean, I was aware of Dr. Malone and that he says he invented mRNA. I haven't investigated any of that. Dr. Ruby, people know Dr. Ruby, right? Dr. Jane Ruby. She's blocked me now on X. I was surprised by that. Listen, I don't really know her either. Oh, damn it, I forgot to bring this. So the thing that's funny about all this, let me take a step back. This is all going to tie together in a very coincidental way. No other way to say it. And I'm not implying anything other than that. So Dr. Jane Ruby is a doctor who I also don't really know well. I'm aware of this person. I've seen her on X. And I had some interaction with her back around the time that I had called Dr. Malone on the telephone. See, that's part of the reason why it was so surprising that Dr. Malone agreed to do the interview, because I was basically an asshole to him the last time we interacted. I mean, not overtly. Look, I called the guy up to ask him a serious question about something serious that he was talking about. Had to do with, remember, the date. John Cullen had discovered that video. I want to make sure I don't get the dates wrong, but John had discovered a video of the guy from the WHO, some fancy British guy, maybe it was Peter Daszak, I don't know, but announcing like, first person who has died of COVID. And then like the next day, they signed a contract to make all these vaccines. That's not accurate. Let's refer back to John's research, but it was along those lines. Like, wait a minute, how can this possibly be explained? Here's this guy saying it. How could you know that this was going to be a giant pandemic on like the day after the first guy died? And everybody's explanation made no sense, except for John's. John's explanation was the only one that made sense. Not, he's not a doctor, but just logical deduction. He's incredible at it, and he is good at absorbing all these different data points and understanding the root cause analysis that he says he's always trained to do. So he's like, what's the problem? Okay, epidemic works like this. Okay, leads to this, leads to this, leads to this, and he gets to the root of the problem. Doesn't have to be a doctor. And look at that, when he spoke to Malone yesterday, he said that it's plausible. And he was very complimentary. Let me take another step back, because I really do need to compliment Dr. Malone. I don't think too many people would have had I don't think I would have agreed to do an interview with me if I were him. He would have said, oh, and by the way, I didn't contact him. His book agent contacted me. He has that new book out. So I'm on, lists, I think from Charles, because it used to be, they were doing it a lot when we actually created, I think, the Wednesday show before the pandemic. That's what happened. Some book person contacted Charles and wanted to interview, some book agent wanted Charles to interview somebody, but Charles didn't want to take away from what he wants to talk about on his show. So we created that Wednesday slot before the pandemic to be for interviewing people from these book agents. And people might remember, there was a while we did a lot of those interviews with Charles. And then on Sunday, he'd have used to do a PDF every weekend and would present all kinds of stuff, articles and his research and whatever documents from the Clinton thing he had. And then the format really changed after the pandemic. But the point is, I was on the list, I guess, from those book agent people, and for whatever reason, they've recently started emailing me again. This is the first one I've taken them up on, because every other, there's most of the people they're sending me, I don't know who this person is, and I haven't read the book, and I don't have time to read all these books. I was interested, obviously, when they sent me this Robert Malone. I was like, what? I couldn't believe that they were asking me if I wanted to interview Robert Malone. I thought it had to be a mistake. And to be completely honest, John and I even had a phone call, but we figured that between communicating through this book agent, that he didn't remember that it was us. Like maybe he's too important to know my name, or that it was me on the phone, or whatever. I just figured this was a mistake, and he was going to get on the Zoom and immediately say, oh, I don't want to talk to you guys, and end the show, which is why we didn't do it live. We pre-recorded it and then put it out live. But what I'm getting at is, when we got on, I said something to him like, oh, can you see us, Dr. Malone? And he said, I can see John on the Skype. And so the fact that he recognized John by face, knew exactly who he was, and we hadn't even started yet. We got idiots in the background. It's like gorillas in the mist. Idiots in before that. Can see John. Man, and that when that, damn it. Damn it, I hope we're still broad. Brutal. When he stayed on the broadcast and acknowledged that he recognized John, that sent a subtle message that this guy was agreeing to, I mentioned somewhere in there that an adversarial interview for him. Let's see if it continues. Are we still going? People would have had the courage to do that broadcast with us. And he certainly didn't need to. Obviously, he gets on Joe Rogan and all kinds of big broadcasts. Why does he need to talk to us? I don't know. It sent a message to me that he maybe wanted to right a wrong. Anyway, whatever. I can't speak to what motivates the guy, but that's how it all unfolded. He's got a book he's trying to sell. His book agent contacted me, We set it up. John and I had a call based on what we're going to do if Malone realizes it's us and hangs up. That caused us to decide to not do it live, to not make him look stupid or us look stupid if it didn't work out. And I didn't edit it at all. We just recorded it live and then immediately within less than 90 minutes put it out, like an hour later, not even.
With another process.
And I thought it was a very good interview. I thought we learned a lot. See, this is good. I wanted to come out and show people. Now that I don't do the regular walks with Charles, I'm not really going to the same places in the city that I had been previously. And I used to come down Fifth Avenue, you know, almost every Sunday to meet him in the park. And just look at this. The notion of even a single store being closed on Fifth Avenue prior to the pandemic. Yeah, I mean, you'd see it, but it would be closed because somebody would have it wrapped up because they're decorating it to be the next thing that's coming right away. I think that's a Seinfeld joke, right? Feel my fabric. 50% cotton, 50% linen, 50% silk. How could you go wrong? Anyway, so Malone, there was something very, I don't know, you know, we were all kind of feeling each other out because, look, he doesn't know us, we don't know him. He's got a lot of reason to distrust us, and we have a lot of reason to distrust him. But my initial interest in Dr. Malone was nothing to do with any of his COVID or mRNA, any of that. Because, by the way, either he did or did not invent the mRNA, okay? Step one. And if he did, he says he did. I would take the guy at his word until I haven't even seen the evidence that he didn't. I think that's Dr. Ruby's position. We'll talk about that in a minute. But he's saying he's working on the team, contributing to the team. Whenever these inventions from 30 years ago happen, there's all kinds of disputes over who invented what. I've seen it happen right in front of my eyes, working on 3D cameras. Who thinks who did what and who was the person that was important at doing it or whatever. People have a lot of distorted perspectives of things. And I'm not claiming to know anything about who did or did not invent mRNA. I accept Dr. Malone's claim right now. If Dr. Ruby ever decides she wants to speak to me again and explain to me what she's upset about, I'd like to understand it because, as I said, my interest in Dr. Malone is the lawfare aspect. And so, the question I'm asking in this video is, was the guy conscripted into lawfare? You might be saying to yourself, Jason, what the hell are you talking about? So, let me take everybody back. See, I've delivered it once already, and I'm refining it now. My What is Lawfare PowerPoint presentation. Hi. Oh, hey, that's a neighbor from my building. In it, I explain what lawfare is. I think a lot of people don't realize, or even if they realize, hearing it, as John often says, and I agree, hearing it codified, got a lot of that. It just helps you identify it when you see it. It helps you organize your thoughts about it in your mind, helps you start to understand it. So to codify lawfare, it's been written about quite a lot, at least in the United States. Initially, there are many authors now who are writing about the subject, but it primarily focuses on the use of law as a mechanism of war. So, I mean, there are some people who write about it from the standpoint of, you know, practicing in the International Criminal Court and the issues that the United States has with things that happen in the International Criminal Court because it's not really recognized, and how other countries are doing things in international law and how they're doing things in, you know, district courts. Certainly Chinese companies, we see all this stuff with TikTok and whatever. So there are, I think, legitimate, you know, legal scholars who are writing about it and examining it from that standpoint, but I don't feel that way, and that's my personal opinion when it comes to Dunlap Charles Dunlap Jr., the Major General, the retired Major General, the JAG officer from the U.S. Air Force who does all the writing about it. See, I think that guy, and I don't have evidence, this is just my personal opinion based on reading about him. I spoke to him on the phone one time, looking at all this different stuff I'm going to be talking to you about here for the next little while. It's my opinion that that guy is very involved in efforts to take these military tactics. See, if lawfare is a mechanism of warfare and engaging in it is engaging in fifth generation war, I think we're seeing that now. There's a crossover, you know, from what I'm talking about with the Air Force JAG department talking about it from the standpoint of fighting Iran in court, to people talking about it on the news as like, hey, this is happening to Elon Musk and Donald Trump and me and other people. I just don't think you should be allowed to walk into a U.S. district court and start using it as a theater for warfare with retired generals and multi-million dollar and billion-dollar think tanks and people who work for and contract to the Department of Homeland Security and have access to incredible resources and decades-long relationships with FBI agents and special agents and directors and general counsels and people who have now become district court judges and are presiding over the very lawfare cases that these people are bringing. And we can, it's, you know, this isn't some amorphous blob, you know, calling it the blob takes away from what I think we need to do, which is to identify the actual individuals who are involved. I'm talking about Andrew Weissman, Valerie Caproni, Norm Eisen, Benjamin Wittes, the pillars of this lawfare movement that, if they are dragged out into the light and prosecuted individually, collectively as a RICO, I don't know, I'm not a lawyer, I'm just saying these are the people who did these things and continue to. And when I see certain individuals, you know, avoiding, just aggressively avoiding talking about this stuff when supposedly this is what they're interested in, it makes me wonder what the hell these people are actually trying to do. So I don't want to get into the Jack Posobiec dust-up specifically, or the Mike Benz dust-up specifically, but it's interesting to see where these people are promoted. And like, in other words, Mike Benz, he went right into the Trump rally with Jack Posobiec. And if you go on to X, if you're not following on X, you really are missing the interactive portions of all this. I recommend that people do follow on X at JG_CSTT. But look at the pinned tweet is my interaction with Jack over there on 8th Avenue the other day. And look at the comments. There are a lot of people who are saying things like, well, wait a minute, you know, Jack is a public figure. I just said I don't want to talk about this, and here I am talking about it, but it is related because it's got to do with the relationships between all these people and exactly what might be going on. But Jack was a public figure in public. I didn't see his wife there. If you even see my video, she's wearing a hat, she's looking down. I just saw Jack. He's wearing a bright blue jacket or something. Noticed him there. And I want to ask him about his book. Now, I don't need to have read and studied the book to know what the book is about. I've seen the guy on multiple podcasts talking about his position on this topic. He thinks it's Thomas Crooks on the roof, single shooter. I'm aware of that. I've heard him say it a million times. I've seen him post about it on X a million times. I know his position. I know he's written a book about it. It's not like I've come to some Jack Posobiec press conference. What the hell is going on here? To ask all these Jack Posobiec specific questions. I just randomly ran into the guy in the middle of the street. I'm aware he's written a book. I'm aware his position on the Trump assassination is absurd. and not based on evidence. And I asked him, how can you ignore all this evidence? If he's not ignoring the evidence, see now what we know that I didn't know then, because it's true I didn't read the book, but I didn't say to him, hey, I read your book and it ignored the evidence. I just said, why did you ignore the evidence? And when I said the book doesn't say anything about it, it was based on my understanding from seeing him explain what the hell the book is about. So it's him that was lying. He immediately accuses me of lying, which I didn't lie. I asked him, how can you ignore this evidence? If I'm wrong, he could have said, you obviously haven't seen my latest interview in which I've changed my position, because in the book, although you're right, Jason, it doesn't say anything about evidence of a second shooter except for one mention, which is a quotation of Clay Higgins saying there is no evidence of a second shooter. He could have politely said, yeah, you know what? At the time we published it, I hadn't seen that, but I'm starting to see more of it now, and we're going to do a follow-up. Good to see you, Jason. Have fun inside. And he could have walked away, and there would be no problem. But see, people who aren't stupid or sock puppet Twitter accounts for Jack realize that that's a strange response for him to have. Just like when Patrick Byrne freaked out when I asked him, why is Mike Lindell interacting with Mary Fanning and Dennis Montgomery? He could say, I don't know. I don't know anything about Mary Fanning. I don't know. Mike's got a lot of business relationships that I'm not involved in, but good to see you, Jason. Have a nice day. Why didn't he say that and walk away? These guys become enraged just by my presence. I mean, do they hate me so much? I barely interact with these guys. You could take all the collective time I've spent talking to and interacting with them and jam it into probably less than 3 hours. But yet they get so incredibly pissed off. When I ask them these very specific questions, you know, it's not like I went to Jack's kid's birthday party and started asking. Like if I'm in Pizza Hut and suddenly he's there with his family and I'm asking this, I could see people being put off by that. But I saw him walking by himself on 8th Avenue to a political event, and I started talking to him about political questions about his book. He's a public figure, he's an author, so he freaked out. So, okay, enough with that. I wanted to give that treatment so that people could understand. I think what's happening is there is more pressure on these guys, and when they see me, because I'm to some degree a source of some of that pressure, they just hate me and they can't control their anger.
No, she saw me.
I wonder what she thought of the assassination. But they freak out, they lose their minds, it's incredible. But somebody asked me in a comment, I think on Patreon, and by the way, thanks to everybody who sponsors the show. I've been around now for 8 years, and that's given me the time to observe these different characters and really understand the arc of this very complicated story. So thank you to everyone who's sponsoring the show on subscribestar.com or patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. Also on odyssey.com/@crowdsourcethetruth and crowdsourcethetruth.substack.com. Thanks to all of the sponsors. But yeah, so we had that interview. Now, see, let's go back to the interview with Dr. Malone, because you see, I want to understand this lawfare. Now, remember, Dr. Malone, he spoke to us about a lawsuit that he had with the Washington Post, and you know, we commented on my kind of past association. We briefly commented a little bit on my on my past association and knowledge of his attorney. I'm talking about Stephen Biss, of course. So see, that was interesting. I mean, the way that he behaved to me was very normal. The way, see, you gotta also remember, how old is Malone? 70 or something? I don't mean to insult you, Dr. Malone. Maybe he's 68. I'm just saying, he's an older guy like this guy. He should know better than riding a bicycle on the sidewalk. But some people who are old are still stupid and selfish. Dr. Malone, to me, he looks like a guy with a lot of wisdom. I don't know if he has kids or anything like that, but very often people who do are better at this than I am. But this, and maybe he's, Christian and turned the other cheek and all that. But it seemed like he was a guy who made up his mind that he was going to forgive us and have a conversation. Because he also said something else to John. He said that he's been watching his research about the assassination attempt and it was excellent work. So see, something spinning around in Dr. Malone's mind before yesterday was saying to himself, wait a minute, see, these guys are coming at me in a way that makes me think they're part of this whole everybody's attacking me effort, and they're just jerks. We get sort of filed under J for jerks in his mind, and everybody who's a jerk and coming at him, I could understand if he thought these people all work together. He might have thought, whoever Washington Post, whoever he thinks is against him, sent me and John to mess with him. So he's sitting there in his house watching the research on the assassination attempt, saying, wait a minute, here's this guy, John Cullen, who I think is a jerk, and who I think maybe is some sort of social engineer, but yet he's doing all this good research, and he's perplexed in his mind. And maybe, like I've begun to do, maybe he starts to explore alternative explanations for how somebody might behave like this or how this circumstance might unfold. Or maybe he just decided he was going to forgive us and wants to sell his book. I don't know. The point is, we got to talking, and I think all John wanted to do was get this theory to somebody like Malone, who is seen by a lot of people as a COVID-19 thought leader. John doesn't get invited to speak on stage. Oh my God, look at that. The cutest. This dog.
He's a dancing dog.
Unbelievable. Did you train
No.
him to do that, or he just does that?
He can walk a city block like that. It's like a circus dog.
Walk an entire block standing on the hind legs.
Yeah. Somebody will go right across the room.
What kind of dog is he?
They both have Havanese.
Very cute. Have a nice day, man. Let me ask you a question. If you don't want to answer, you don't have to. Kamala Harris or Donald Trump?
Kamala Harris.
Have a nice day. So see, people are still crazy in New York. That woman's going to really vote for Kamala Harris. Well, I mean, okay. Living on Fifth Avenue, she's out of her mind. Cute dog, though. So anyway, look, that just felt genuine to me, the congratulating John on the good work on the assassination attempt. I mean, I don't know. Maybe seeing that work caused Dr. Malone to just think, hey, you know what? These guys are trying to do the right thing, and maybe I had something wrong. But it allowed us to get to this new place. And the unfortunate side effect is some kind of argument broke out in the comments, and Dr. Ruby was upset, and she's blocked me. I don't think I even said anything in those comments. I definitely wasn't trying to say anything against Dr. Ruby, but she's mad at me again, and she blocked me. So I attempted to message her on her website, and if she ever sees this, we can let her know that her Proton Mail, the email address on her website, it bounces back. So I tried to contact her through a form on her website. I don't know if that sends to the same email address that bounces back, but I was just basically trying to apologize to her. I mean, I don't have any beef with Dr. Ruby that I'm aware of. I mean, I'm not mad at her. So just for people who don't know what's going on there, Dr. Malone sued her. And the comments that she was posting, this looks like Israeli hostage victims and people who died. Anyway, as I said, I was aware of Dr. Ruby's lawsuit with Dr. Malone. Let's get into this part of it here. So I had contacted Dr. Malone, and I think I mentioned we're not going to be having Charles tonight, so that's why I wanted to do this kind of extra long show. So we see we have the cops here, but they're obviously not here to enforce the law because skateboarding in the park is illegal and they're doing nothing. That's all they do is nothing. I don't even know why they're here. So I had initially contacted Dr. Malone because George sued him. Now, what we're going to have to do is, I'm going to have to go back to all these lawsuits. See, I'd like to talk to Dr. Ruby because I'm trying to unravel this. I'm not trying to take the side of one or the other, Dr. Malone or Dr. Ruby. I just don't know the details of the case. So she was up there in the comments in X explaining that she has posted things about her lawsuit. Obviously, she wasn't happy that positive things were being said about Dr. Malone, and she was telling us that people who want to be real journalists, which I guess she's talking about me, could go to her website and look up her whole lawsuit and everything. And that was a little rude because, as I just explained to everybody, it's not like I sought out Dr. Malone and said, hey, let's do a big interview with Dr. Malone. They sent me that email and it just came together. I don't communicate with Dr. Ruby on a regular basis, and I'm not always thinking about her lawsuit and her problems. I got like 50 lawsuits that I'm involved in, and it was kind of out of the ordinary to get this email from this book agent for Dr. Malone. This park is just terrible right now, and those cops are doing nothing. So I wasn't really thinking about Dr. Ruby and her lawsuit issues. And by the way, when I first contacted Dr. Ruby, I did want to talk to her about this law. This was the day that I called Dr. Malone. And remember, he got all flustered and pissed off on the phone. He was losing his lawsuit in that moment, the Dr. Ruby lawsuit. And he was flustered and pissed off because Stephen Biss had had a stroke like right around that time. And I don't know, maybe he was trying to get another lawyer or something and couldn't. I don't know what any of his, legal situation or personal deal is. I guess that's a Halloween costume. But he was caught off guard, pissed off, on the phone, not happy with me, obviously. And then I think Dr. Ruby heard that. Yeah, see, I had contacted her at some time before that, wanting to talk to her about the lawsuit, probably right around the same time that I was contacting, did you guys hear they decided that closing all the weed stores was unconstitutional? That just happened this morning. They closed all those weed stores, padlocked to protect. They said unconstitutional. Federal court. So now you got to sell weed. I told you it's mandatory. But yeah, I forgot about that. I saw that on Law, whatever. Oh, will this make me pay him if I just go near this? It's kind of interesting. Jazz people set up right there. What the hell was I just talking about? Okay, so right, Dr. Ruby, right. So I became interested in Dr. Malone when George sued him, and I found that because I'm just frequently searching the docket for stuff with George's last name in it to see where his brother is suing me. So I came to this lawsuit where George was suing Malone. I don't even remember what for. I don't remember what George was suing Malone for. Let's have a Jazz background for this. What do people think of that? Good idea? Nice jazz. Yeah, we'll just stay right here.
You had like a boyfriend that still lived.
Anyway. So George sues Malone. I find that on Pacer, and then I'm just trying to figure out, see, when I see the lawsuit, I don't read the letter of the lawsuit. That's what Dr. Ruby was saying in the comments on X last night. She was saying, oh, go, a journalist would read my lawsuit and know what's going on. But you see, when I first contacted her, I wanted to interview her about the lawsuit, and she said no. And I detected, and this was justifiable, I detected that she was suspicious of me. And like I said, that's justifiable. We don't know each other, and we are each people who have been subjected to this lawfare treatment where you just don't know who's in there that's telling the truth and who's lying. You guys saw the federal court said it was unconstitutional for the cops to close all the weed stores? You did see that. So you go and you get your federal court money? Good, you guys are on it. These guys are geniuses. That was Alan Dershowitz right there. Do not buy weed in the park. That's my advice. Not legal advice. I'm not a lawyer. It's just my anecdotal opinion. But you should take it. Contacted her while the case was still going on. Said, hey, I see Stephen Biss is suing you. I want to talk to you about this. And she probably, who knows how many morons Stephen Biss had coming at that woman prior to me calling her. So she was suitably suspicious. And likewise for me, this has been going on for so long now. There are other people who I've contacted like this thinking, here's somebody who's also getting sued by Stephen Biss. Maybe they can be an ally. And you know what? Many times I've had conversations with like sensible people who are lawyers who are saying, hey, what the hell is going on with this guy? And sometimes we talk on the phone for 2 hours or more. And then, I'm thinking of, this happened definitely with one person, maybe as many as two. But I don't really have follow-up with these people. They're lawyers who are dealing with stuff for their own clients, and one of them got the Biss case. One of them got Biss sanctioned. This was happening in Maryland. Biss was all over the place, and people could see that I was tangling with him, so lawyers would contact me. And I had contacted other people. I've spoken about this. I contacted Kim Picasio a long time ago. And I had ultimately come to the determination that Kim Picasio herself, as far as I could tell, was a lawfare practitioner and had been trying to, gain my trust so she could harm me at some point in the future. That's my opinion. I could be wrong, but that's what I think. I don't think lawyers who are mothers who have husbands have hours and hours to spend on the phone with me and on live streams as animated cats. I just don't think they do. I could be wrong, but that's my opinion. So perhaps like me, Dr. Ruby might have felt that the person on the other end of the phone could easily be a lawfare operative, and I don't want to talk to him. But anyway, I wasn't thinking about her when I got this email from Dr. Malone's book agent. And honestly, I didn't think Dr. Malone was going to stay on the interview. John and I, in the conversation that we had a whole plan, because we started out with a plan for if he hangs up, we'll carry on with this deck, and then we'll do a Patreon and Subscribestar and Odyssey presentation for everybody. And then after that, we said, no, that's not good. Because if he hangs up, we'll be all flustered. Let's just pre-record it. But we don't usually do that. We don't usually have these phone calls. This is Dershowitz. We don't usually have these phone calls before the show. He just usually sends me a deck and a quip by email or text or DM for what the title should be. And that's it. We're not usually, game planning like we were for this.
a miracle with one condition. He said, take your money, get out of town, don't try and start another religion.
I don't know if that's
Rainmaker.
my kind of music there. So what did Malone tell us? He told us he ran into all kinds of problems with that big muckety-muck at, what was it? Salk, right? At the Salk Laboratory or whatever it is, Salk Institute. Salk Institute. See, we didn't get into this with Dr. Malone, but the foreword of his book was written by General Flynn. So I don't really know what the background is between Dr. Malone and General Flynn. I mean, are they like old chums, or do they maybe just know each other from hanging out with Robert Kennedy recently at these kind of events? Or I don't know, maybe, you know what? Is it that Flynn invites Dr. Malone to his, big events and gets some hotel rooms and speaking fees and stuff like that? I wonder. Because you see, the whole Lawfare thing, it ties directly to Flynn. Do people remember how my entanglement in Lawfare got started? It's been going on for 8 years. Let's go through it. Started shortly after I met George Webb. George, one of the first things he wanted to do was to get together with Charles, to interview Charles. And we did that on June 30th. I think I met George in April or May and started working with him pretty regularly in May or June, and had completely kicked him out by like August. So, as we look back on it now, it was a pretty short-lived interaction, but man, the damage that drunk asshole was able to do. But let's go through it. One of the first things that came up when we were talking to Charles was this whole issue with the Hillary Clinton emails and the GOP operative who sought these Clinton emails from hackers. That was Peter Smith, who had implied a connection to Flynn. And this was when Flynn was the national security, what was he? National Security Advisor? Chief of the National Security Council, one of those things. Trump's National Security Advisor. That was before they had kicked him out. That article was June 30th. That was the day. Remember all these coincidences? That was the day that we met with Charles. Shane Harris writes that article. Shane Harris appears on Rachel Maddow with Ben Wittes. And remember, Ben Wittes, he is oh no, that's not what I wanted to show people. No, that's not it yet. Ben Wittes, do I have it here? Well, people know Ben Wittes is the director of the Lawfare Institute. Whatever, we can look at it here. This is a 2013 podcast. DIA Chief General Michael Flynn speaks at the Brookings Institution. We've spoken about this speech before, but Ben Wittes writes this in November of 2013, 11 years ago. And this is where Flynn is giving this speech about a new model for defense intelligence. You can go watch this. It's on YouTube right now. In fact, I recommend you do. Flynn, throughout this whole thing, he's basically talking about the same stuff that Valerie Caproni talks about. He doesn't refer to it as going dark. That's, specifically FBI lingo. But he's talking about how the biggest problem for DIA and other intelligence agencies in the United States right now is this proliferation of technology. And he says we need a new focus on cyberspace. And so what's he talking about? He's talking about fifth generational warfare. He mentions Twitter a number of times, which frankly, for a dunce like Flynn with his 1.25 grade point average, I just wonder.
I have no idea what that is.
Look, there's the weed selling guy with his video producer or something. So what is this guy making a movie here in Washington Square Park with people skateboarding? Is he going to make money from that? Breaking the law? And the cops are letting that go on? Who is this asshole? He looks like every asshole NYU wannabe producer I've ever known. So Flynn's there with the Brookings Institute on the Lawfare podcast with the guy who is the director of the Lawfare Institute, and he's written about by Shane Harris in the Wall Street Journal on the day that I meet Charles, and Shane calls him to say, we're running this story and we want a quote from you. You know, Charles has told us this story before. So how does Dr. Malone know Michael Flynn? And my question is Dr. Malone a target in this? Because he seems like a really nice guy from talking to him yesterday. I mean, you know, there might be things he says that I disagree with. And he also said in our conversation, what did he say about BIS and $50,000? He said something about $50,000 going down a hole. See, the other thing is, maybe, and I don't know, I hope we get an opportunity to speak to Dr. Malone again. But you see, maybe I had called Dr. Malone. This guy was just texting right here. These two idiots are standing around. Oh, now he's texting again. Perfect. Great situational awareness. See, Lawfare, it's not straightforward at all. It's not always necessarily George's brother versus me, or Stephen Biss versus me, or whatever. There are fake co-defendants, fake plaintiffs. I think sometimes both sides are completely fake. Remember, Stephen Biss represented, well, he was on the team. He was on the legal team that represented Paula Jones when she sued Bill Clinton. And remember, Dr. Malone, the 50,000, he said something about the 50,000 going down a hole. He seemed quite displeased with Stephen Biss. So when I first contacted him, I was telling him, Dr. Malone, don't trust Stephen Biss. Something weird going on with this George Webb lawsuit. At the time, I told him, I think they're trying to do something to you, Dr. Malone. And he was like, oh, ha, silly Jason, don't worry, Stephen Biss is my lawyer. And basically he told me to, you know, piss off. So if you're now, months and months later, unhappy with Stephen Biss and thinking, maybe that guy Jason was correct, and maybe part of the reason we got beef after that was that I shined him off rather than listening to him. And my point is, maybe Dr. Malone, yeah, definitely come over here and look at what I'm doing, you two fucking idiots. I'm the most dangerous guy in the park. Keep your eyes on me, you shitheads. NYPD, absolute knuckleheads. What are you looking at, stupid? What the fuck are you two idiots doing? There's people selling drugs in the park and you're over here looking at me. Shitheads. So perhaps, after months of thinking about it, Dr. Malone had a change of heart and figured, you know what, I'll give these guys a chance. And by the way, the other thing that John and I discussed in our phone call was, we don't want to make this guy look like an asshole. We want to talk to him about this stuff. Yeah, good. Walk away, you dunces. And we agreed that we're going to be nice to him. Our fear was that he would realize it's us and hang up. So we wanted to do the interview, and the interview went well. I'm sad, and I hope that Dr. Ruby will have a change of heart, because I did actually go to her website after she posted that and after she blocked me to try to understand her case. The email that I sent her said, hey, look, I'm sorry you got angry. I didn't tell John to say whatever he said, and I'm not trying to create a problem with you. I'd like to talk to you about this, and I hope you'll forgive me. I hope Dr. Ruby sees this video, because you see, when I went to her website, it is a sort of an article written by her about the lawsuit that gave me a paragraph that said something to the effect of, you know, Robert Malone sued me and the complaint was filled with false statements. But it doesn't say what the statements were or what evidence counteracts what it is that they're saying. So I had no way of knowing, you know, it's just her saying something, her word versus his. So I had no way of knowing. So then I went on to Pacer and I just downloaded the complaint from the case. And again, it's still difficult for me to know exactly what's going on, because when it comes to Lawfare, it's not so much about what's written on the page, it's about what's going on between the lines. But because I know Stephen Biss and have read so much bullshit that stroked out moron has written, and by the way, I don't even know if Stephen Biss is still incapacitated, if he's recovered from his stroke, I don't know if he's alive or dead. But the point of the matter is, I've read a lot of stupid things that he's submitted in court, and this was one of them. So I have a feeling that Dr. Malone might not have exactly known, you know, when you hire an attorney, or at least I used to be like this, you know, when I hired Snyder to be my attorney for the Emmys case, I basically just gave him all the information and then just stepped off a cliff. And the feeling is my lawyer is handling this. I think a lot of people might kind of take that attitude with a lawyer, and I'm here to tell you again, this is not legal advice, but that's a dangerous and I think not likely to succeed attitude to have with a lawyer. You can't just leave everything in their hands. You got to watch everything that they do. But there's basically two possibilities here, right? Possibility one is that Dr. Malone is a malicious and terrible guy who wanted to sue Dr. Ruby and waste all of her money and time and cost her a ton of money. Is this a Jaguar E-Pace? It's kind of cool, good-looking car. They had a lot of those in Norway. Yeah, it is. You don't see too many of those in the United States. They're selling them all to Norway. But look, it's two options. Either Dr. Malone is a sinister lawfare guy who's trying to go around doing lawsuits and ruin the Bregans and Dr. Ruby's life, or there's lawfare going on and someone might have tricked Dr. Malone into becoming the plaintiff here. Like, remember when I told this story about how Susan Holmes tricked me into answering the complaint? It's very similar to how John Snyder tricked me into answering the complaint. See, these lawfare suits, they're very, very much based on trickery. Susan Holmes tricked me because I was ignoring it. And if I had just completely ignored it, what I now know from having spent 8 years practicing law in U.S. District Court, and I would normally never say that because I'm not a lawyer and I don't consider myself a lawyer, I don't think I'm a lawyer, I don't want to be a lawyer, but a judge said that to me in Steele v. Goodman after only 2 years. She said, "Mr. Goodman, you've been practicing law in federal court for 2 years. Don't give me this malarkey about not knowing what you're doing." And I was taken aback because here we are 6 years after that, and I still don't know what I'm doing in terms of being a lawyer. I don't claim to. But anyway, this judge told me I was practicing law. So after 8 years of doing that, I have observed a lot of stuff, and I now know enough to say that I do believe if I had just ignored the original, what the hell is this? Experimental humanities social engagement. What the hell is this? This wasn't here when I went to NYU. Again, I lose the train of thought. Luckily, we have the comments today to remind me of what the hell I was just talking about before. Is this a social engineering department here at NYU? It sounds like it. Hawkins would love this. Wait, what was I talking about? The trickery of Lawfare. Right, Susan Holmes. Yes, if I had ignored that case and done nothing, which is easy to do, I think the judge would have said, hey, this is a bullshit case filled with nonsense, but also this guy lives in New York, so we don't have jurisdiction over him. Get it out of here, send it to New York. I think, I don't know. It's also, a lot of weird stuff happened in that Eastern District of Virginia court as well, so we don't know what would have happened. I had a lawyer many years ago who used to tell me Charlie Chaplin lost the Charlie Chaplin look-alike contest, which was his way of saying nothing is a slam dunk in court and you really never know which way anything is going to go, which is why it's always so idiotic for all these people who tell you, oh, Laura's going to lose this case against Bill Maher, or, you know, Larry's going to lose this case or that case. That's got more to do with the fact that the people who have co-opted the justice in the United States of America hate people who actually want to deal with facts and reality and evidence, and they just want to be able to make everything go their own way. This thing can't stay in business. It was BBQ many, many years ago, but it just can't seem to stay in. This is all NYU around here, so again, things being out of business over here is... That was Paulina Poroskova, I'm pretty sure. Wasn't it? Did people see her? I used to see Rick Ocasek and her around here all the time. I think that was her. Losing my train of thought like crazy. Right, Susan Holmes. Yeah, so I would have ignored it. Or at least that was a risk. That was a possibility they were worried about. They're like, hey, Jason's ignoring this. He's not answering the complaint. Make him answer it. And I should have just moved to dismiss it on the basis that it was idiotic. But I didn't do that. She convinced me that it needed to be answered, and, you know, she sort of sucked me in to this whole mess. So, you know, someone, not Stephen Biss, maybe Flynn, could speak to, could be anyone, actually. You know, they have all kinds of people who approach you as well-meaning viewers, listeners, followers, financial contributors, collaborators, people that you might date, any way that you might meet or interact with anyone. The people that I'm talking about are going to try to find a way to insert somebody into your sphere. So someone would have said, hey, Dr. Malone, this article from the Washington Post, and by the way, it could have been the Washington Post wanting to do this. What if the Washington Post set this up? But they write this article about Malone, and the goal would be, by the way, we want anybody, and look at what they just did to him yesterday. Community guidelines strike on the video on YouTube. Yeah, by the way, watch, if you haven't seen the video, you can get it on Odyssey still. It's free. If you go to odyssey.com/@crowdsourcethetruth, it's right there. You don't even have to subscribe. It's free to subscribe. But you can also sponsor the show on odyssey.com/@crowdsourcethetruth for as little as $3 a month plus a 58-cent Odyssey fee. Great way to keep the show going, great way to keep Odyssey going. They're working on 2.0. It's going to get better. I know there's certain things about it that don't work as well as YouTube, but it is constantly improving. And there are things about it that work way better than YouTube. They didn't, you know, community guidelines. They didn't hit the video. But anyway, you can also see it on X. The point is, he's one of these guys like me with the Port of Charleston. They wanted to make a point. They wanted to set an example. Holy crap, when did this get built? What? Wow. That seems fast. I think there's two people watching this right now who kind of grew up with me in this neighborhood who are thinking the same thing I'm thinking. How quickly was this built? Yeah, all right, go back inside. Kind of amazing. It looks like fancy, expensive condos to me. Huh. Oh my gosh. No, I guess it's on the next block. Yeah. Anyway, you can still see the video on X. But it seems like they were trying to make a point where anybody, here's even a high-level doctor, you're gonna come out and say this or that, we're gonna slam you. So it's possible that Biss wanted doctors like Malone to look at Malone and say, oh my God, look at what happens when you try to sue one of these things for slandering you. Then you're slandered and broke. Because Malone said, oh, $50,000 down a hole or whatever he said, seemed to indicate that, you know, he paid Biss the retainer, Biss stroked out, and then what? He lost the case. So I guess he couldn't do anything. He lost his 50 grand. Here's Japanica, it's still here. I was worried this restaurant had closed. I never go there anymore, but you know, I don't know, it's been here forever and I used to go there all the time. I don't know, I'm just getting a vibe that Dr. Malone was targeted here and that Stephen Biss sucked him into the case. Because think about this, the other thing that came out in Steele v. Goodman, where Robert David Steele sued me, was that he wasn't paying Stephen Biss. He said that Stephen Biss was working on contingency and would only be paid upon winning, which is absurd in this case. I've said this many times before, and if you are a lawyer or know any of them, you're gonna know the only types of lawyers that work on contingency generally are personal injury attorneys, certain types of class action lawsuits, possibly, and very, very rare special cases. It's not the type of thing that regular lawyers do because they know that Charlie Chaplin might lose the Charlie Chaplin lookalike contest and they're not into going to Vegas. They want to get paid for being lawyers. So they're not going to do your case on contingency. That in and of itself is very strange because a sensible attorney who's not a lawfare practitioner like Biss would recognize that even if they've got a great case and he's a fantastic lawyer and they win, it's very likely that Jason doesn't have enough money to even pay the legal bill. And this is going to be a waste of time. Somebody's going to lose a lot of money when that company goes out of business and you can't get the car fixed anymore. So if Biss is doing free lawsuits for idiots like Robert David Steele, he's going to need somebody paying the bills, and doctors have money. So somebody might have convinced Dr. Malone that he should sue the Washington Post. In fact, didn't Shane Harris go to work for the Washington Post? Yes. By 2022, Shane Harris was working for the Washington Post. And so, if you needed to fund lawfare attorneys like Stephen Biss, could you see to it that defamatory articles were written about doctors who have money and an interest in protecting their professional reputation who might be likely to sue? And if you had a fucking idiot like Devin Nunes, who to the uninformed seems like a reasonable guy. He had a job in Congress. He hangs out with Trump sometimes. Maybe you could be fooled into thinking he's not a fucking idiot and a traitor and a liar. Perhaps people could be fooled to think that. And maybe Somebody like that. I'm not saying Devin Nunes did this, but somebody like that. Someone with a reputation that sensible people might trust, or seemingly sensible. I'm not saying that Dr. Malone is insensible. A lot of sensible people think Devin Nunes is trustworthy because they've been fooled. When there's constantly smart people trying to fool you, even if you're smart, you can't stop every shot on goal. Wow, look at that. The Easy Open coconut. $3. That's kind of a good deal. How do they get that on there? Huh, that's an additional monkey. We have to talk to Colin about that. So could the Washington Post just shitpost about Robert Malone to then get somebody to suggest to Malone, hey, why don't you hire this attorney who Malone is too busy or maybe doesn't even know how to research an attorney? I don't know. You'd be surprised. I've known some very smart attorneys who have made some very stupid decisions about their health. And likewise, I've known some very smart doctors who've made some or had some extremely bad outcomes with attorneys. It's funny, it does seem to work that way. I mean, people are smart in sometimes narrow ways. There's another, I like those Australian sheepdogs, shepherds, whatever they're called. So could the Washington Post deliberately provoke a lawsuit so that somebody recommends that Malone retain Biss for $50,000 so that Biss has enough money to carry out a lot of lawfare suits for a lot of different reasons? Because this Washington Post lawsuit gets filed in August of 2022, and then the Robert Malone versus Bregan et al., which involves Dr. Ruby, that happens 2 months later in October. Actually, it's filed the same exact day that I filed Goodman versus the City of New York, although I do not see any connection between those cases. I do think there could be a connection between Dr. Malone's two cases, and we still don't know why George sued Dr. Malone. That case was abandoned by George after Biss had a stroke. Why would you do that? After Biss had a stroke, I went for the jugular on Robert David Steele's wife. I started filing motions to hold them in contempt for not answering a particular thing. When I knew that Biss was incapacitated and the court hadn't said anything about it yet, I was calling for hearings. I knew he wasn't going to do anything, so I figured this is my opportunity to now make the court compel her to do something that she's not going to be able to do, and then I'll end the case. I didn't do nothing and let the case just peter away. That's what George did. Almost as if Biss's unexpected stroke sank the plan. Almost like the attorney for the defendant was working with the plaintiff. Where have we seen that lawfare play before? Oh yeah, that's exactly what I allege John Snyder was doing in the Emmys case. They tricked me into hiring John Snyder, remember, through Jared Beck, who was introduced to me by George Webb. What is Jared Beck famous for? Well, he's the attorney who claims that Sean, what's his name? Some process server. Oh, look at this, Winter Soldier. That's a good costume. But does Winter Soldier have women's hair? That's somebody else. That's some video game person with the metal arm. All right, well, I guess I'm too old to detect Halloween costumes now. Wait, I was just on something good. What was I talking about? Totally forgot with the Halloween distraction. Can the comments jog my memory? We were talking about Malone. So I guess they were just refurbing that McDonald's. It appears to be back. Maybe Trump could get a job there. Wait, what the hell was I just talking about?
No, we're making.
Oh yeah,
jam.
so George brought the lawsuit. Right, and then Biss strokes out, and then the lawsuit did not proceed. George did not ever attempt to serve Malone. He just filed the lawsuit. Jared Beck, exactly. Right, Beck, they had the process server who they said died under strange circumstances after serving who? Debbie Wasserman Schultz, or doing something to do with the DNC and Seth Rich. They had some claim that the process server had died, and this played into all the intrigue of Seth Rich, which, remember, Seth Rich was trying to obfuscate this whole, where did this WikiLeaks information come from, this thing with Peter Smith and the 33,000 emails. And General Flynn was all part of that. We got Flynn appearing with the Brookings Institution and the Lawfare Institute. He's being written about and podcast interviewed with Ben Wittes. He's talking to Bruce, what's his name at the... Cullen keyed into this guy, Bruce Rydell at the Brookings. He's talking to that guy. Flynn is down. These are all the Norm Eisen, these are all the people. And remember, Flynn, when he was like, oh, no, he got prosecuted and he lost his house and this and that. Guess what? That was all theater. That was all theater. And he agreed to do it because on the other side, the light at the end of that tunnel is 4 years later, you're going to be worth millions. You're going to be a MAGA celebrity. Speaking engagements. His family appears to be laundering money through nonprofits. Nobody says anything. So is that part of the deal? Did Flynn set up Dr. Malone? What the hell is this? Soft and delicious every day.
Yes.
What is this? A mini Bowley. Who needs that? It's like the cookie restaurant. How bad could the economy be if people are lining up for cookies? There's still people who have money, I guess. What do people think about all this? So then it takes me back to Dr. Ruby, because see, when I first contacted her, when I found the lawsuit on Pacer, she didn't want to talk to me, I understood. And then we got into some back and forth where I feel like she blocked me once before on Twitter, or maybe didn't block me, but definitely got angry at me, because we had some back and forth about how, my recollection was it was about how she didn't trust me and I didn't trust her. And I said, look, I understand where you're coming from. And my reason, because she revealed to me that we had met each other before. I didn't remember that, because we had met each other at that exact event that Jack Posobiec had invited me to, that I was talking about 2 days ago or whatever, where George met with the guy who had the Joe Biden BlackBerry. It was her condo building, I think that's what she told me on the phone. She was definitely there at the party, at the screening party for Get Me Roger Stone, and I'm pretty sure she said it was her condo building. So in that conversation, I had essentially said to her that I didn't trust her because I met her at a Jack Posobiec event, and that upset her. And I didn't speak to her for a long, long time. Maybe it was when I was yelling at Norm that she, a lot of people who had previously said, oh, Jason is a jerk, came back and said, oh, this is good, he's yelling at Norm. Something's happening with Alien, new Alien movie. They haven't made, like Terminator, they haven't made a good Alien movie since number 2. But anyway.
That's a good time.
Yeah, so she was mad at me for a while. And then after I yelled at Norm, I think, because that tweet, that was really like my first tweet to ever kind of like go viral. And, oh, well, no, that's not true. The Hunter Biden video camera in Congress got to over 1 million. It was one of my first and most viral tweets. And so a lot of people who I hadn't communicated with before tweeting that were communicating with me. And I could be wrong, but I think around then is when Dr. Ruby decided that she no longer, was going to not talk to me. And we were liking each other's tweets and making nice comments here and there. Oh, no, no, no. She probably started talking to me when we had the phone call with Malone. Right, that's what it was. So because she was seeing him in court that day, and he was all flustered because Biss was stroked out and not there. And he probably answered my phone call because maybe he was calling 50 lawyers trying to get anybody at all into court. And when he got a call back, he wanted to answer it, and I jammed him up on the phone. So after that phone call with Malone, I think is when Dr. Ruby started interacting with me on Twitter, and then yesterday she decided no. So I'd like to speak to Dr. Ruby because I think she and Dr. Malone were drawn into a lawfare fight again, because again, I downloaded the complaint and was reading it, but there's a lot of documents there. I kind of want to talk to her about what happened, I mean, I read the order, the final order, the memorandum opinion and the complaint, but it's like I'm not going to mine through a website of somebody who doesn't even want to talk to me about their particular case. I'd love to talk to her about it, and holy cow, there's a guy with a dog in the front basket of that bicycle, a giant dog. Anyway, I want to understand the lawfare aspects of Dr. Ruby's case, so I hope she will get over being angry at me and unblock me on X and talk to me about this, because maybe we can all understand it. But it does seem to me that Flynn is a lawfare operative who's connected to the Lawfare Institute and the Brookings Institution. Oh yeah, Covington and Burling he was using as his law firm until a big deal was made about that, and then he got rid of them and started using Sidney Powell. Remember, maybe that wasn't planned, but because so many people were making a big deal out of Covington and Burling, and it was obviously I mean, honestly, him being represented by Covington and Burling, that didn't make any sense from the start, let alone Eric Holder being the one of the partners or whatever. I mean, now Flynn, like I said, is a celebrity. He's writing books, making movies. I'm sure he's worth several $1 million. But at the time that this all started, he's not the kind of guy that Covington and Burling would represent. He's more the kind of guy that Sidney Powell would represent, an independent, individual, independent thinker who's not part of a big white shoe Washington, D.C. law firm. Covington and Burling is representing giant corporations, super billionaires. They're not messing around with, retired generals and people like Flynn. It just doesn't make sense. It's Day of the Dead week. Dia de Muertos. So there you go. What do people think about all this? I'd like to know more. I'd like to talk to both doctors. And to be clear, I'm not trying to kumbaya, we're all on the same side, we should all be friends. I just want to absorb as much information from both sides as I'm able to understand how this all came about. So Dr. Ruby, she expressed some confusion as to why she was even involved in the case. And see, I'm interested in that too, because frequently that's a component of a Stephen Biss case, is that there's some person who's like, what the hell is this person even doing here? And it's usually a person whose identity you can't resolve, some identity duplexed entity that you can never get to a working phone number or a real person. So it's weird, this is a new thing, that the unknown person is here saying, I don't know what I'm doing in this lawsuit. That was a feature in Kim Picassio's lawsuit, remember? I forget the woman's name, but it was her doing this unknown person created a change.org petition that was the impetus for the lawsuit, and Kim Picasio signed that petition and then got sued under the accusation that she helped create the petition. So I'm saying this notion that they concoct some story that you then get sued for, this is what they're doing all the time. Future of garbage for Hillary Clinton. That's what they're doing all the time. And they set up really elaborate things. So the notion that they would publish an article in the Washington Post to incite a lawsuit from Dr. Malone is not only plausible, I would call it probable, because remember, they staged a bomb hoax at a major US port to try to get me arrested, and it didn't even work. So I think that I have a lot of sympathy for Dr. Malone now. First of all, because he's got guts, and I admire that. I don't think I would have agreed to do the interview with me if I were in his position. So for that alone right away, I give him points. I don't know the guy. It's difficult for me to know when two people are on opposite sides of a conflict who is telling the truth and who is not telling the truth, or the alternative that they're both telling the truth and that there's some other thing that we don't know about that explains some aspect that nobody understands. But Flynn is tricky as hell. And remember, Flynn also got very interested in my conversation with Andrew Weissman, right? When I was talking to Andrew Weissman about Felix Sater. So I just think that Flynn is a double-cross flim-flam man from the beginning. Two-tone Rolls Royce. And people have also noticed that, you know, Flynn's not giving the speech before Elon Musk at the Donald Trump rally. Flynn's never explained that July, what was it, 11th, 7th, just days before the assassination attempt, there's that filing with the Federal Election Commission saying that Flynn is going to be the vice president. And why did Laura right away say that was fake? That really bothered me that she did that. She came and kind of tried to discredit what I was saying without even discussing it with me, and it wasn't fake. It's still there. It might have been that she meant to say that Donald Trump didn't file it, but it's definitely filed. It's still on the website. And Flynn won't address it. The guy who filed it is somebody named Charles, I forget his last name. Why would that stupid idiot think I want to stop what I'm doing and talk to her about an AT&T credit card or whatever they want to give me over there? I wanted to be out here for sunset because this is a nice time of day in the autumn. Maybe we'll catch a little golden hour light. Yeah, Flynn is a stupid idiot. He's there at the Brookings Institution talking about the same stuff that the FBI wants. He's in on all this. He's upset that I'm razzing Weissman about Felix Sater. Felix Sater is trying to get Trump to Moscow for a media event around the Trump Tower, Moscow, maybe so they can get video of Trump going into a hotel, entrap him with a hooker, try to do whatever. Not even entrap him with a hooker. I disagree with Bill Maher that because when he was his 40s or 50s, he was married a few times, that means that Donald Trump necessarily cheats on his current wife. I disagree with that, but Bill Maher is an asshole. I think Laura's got a good shot with her lawsuit. I'd like to speak to Larry or her about it, but I don't know if that's going to happen. So yeah, I think they set all this up. They're very into setting up, like what I'm talking about. They want to set up Trump. So it's got to be big and elaborate and very, very removed from the source. And they need to have people who you think and who the target thinks are their allies. So in this case, General Flynn, he was essentially like George Webb coming to me, or Orrin Levi, not Orrin Levi, Orrin Levi tried it, but it didn't work. I'm thinking of Quinn Michaels. You know, these guys who show up, pretend to be my friend. This is what Flynn did with Trump. He showed up, he's like, hey, I don't trust, I'm flipping on Obama, essentially. I used to work for him, now I'm gonna work for you. I mean, it's an obvious double cross. This is why Ivan Raiklin flips out when I come around. This is why Jack Posobiec flips out when I come around. These guys are his foot soldiers. In my opinion, I could be wrong. You could look at the same facts that I'm looking at, and maybe you'll come to a different conclusion. I think you'd be incorrect, but sensible people are realizing that Jack Posobiec should not have freaked out when I asked him why did he ignore
It's literally just like
evidence of a second shooter. Jack is not the Queen of England. I don't have to be super polite to him and say hello. He says to me, oh, you don't even say hello? You sound like my Aunt Gladys. What do I have? Oh, you never call me, you don't even say hello? Jack, you asshole, you're walking down 8th Avenue. You're a public figure, you've written a controversial book, and I'm asking you a question about the book, right at a political rally that the subject of the book is all about. There could not be a more appropriate moment or place for me to say, hey man, who I didn't expect to see here, how come you've been all over the place, including in your book, denying evidence of a second shooter? And then he lies to the police. You know, some stupid idiot who works for Tim Pool got involved in this conversation on Twitter and started saying that I was lying. What's her name? Lisa Elizabeth. I'd like to sue her. She's such an inconsequential loser that it's literally a waste of my time to even do that. But I mean, that's how this network, holy cow with the cookie place. That's how this network of Lawfare works. You get some idiot like Lisa, who's such a low rent piece of shit, it's not even worth my time to write the complaint to sue her, which would financially ruin her life, and I do have good grounds to pursue. I just don't really want to. She's defamed me, stated lies deliberately, and when I gave her an opportunity to retract and apologize, she wouldn't. So this is a network, right? Tim Pool gets to have his indoor skate park and money and sponsors and monetization on YouTube. Not like Robert Malone, not like me. Wow. Careful with the accidents, bro. Guy's crazy. Anyway, that's the download for right now. Charles is traveling, so this is going to be it for tonight. Thanks to everybody who sponsors the show. Please check out odyssey.com/@crowdsourcethetruth or crowdsourcethetruth.substack.com or subscribestar.com or patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. Huge thank you to everybody who sponsors the show. Couldn't do any of this without you guys.